Elena Royce checked into the Diamond Heights Hotel alone. 3 days later, Marcus Bellamy, her wealthy, married lover, was in handcuffs, and the world was asking one question: what really happened inside room 1904 that night? She was young, rising, and full of secrets. He was powerful, careful, and had everything to lose. When Elena's lifeless body was discovered in a pristine suite with no sign of struggle, it looked like a tragic accident, until investigators uncovered a digital trail, a single fingerprint, and a voice memo that changed everything. This is the chilling unraveling of a deadly love affair, and the woman who left behind the one clue that would bring her killer down. It was the kind of place where nothing bad ever seemed to happen. The Diamond Heights Hotel stood tall in the heart of downtown Chicago, all polished marble, gold-plated elevators, and quiet, conditioned air. The type of place that whispered luxury, where everything was too expensive and too perfect. The staff were trained to notice everything, but never say anything. And when Elena Royce walked through the glass doors that Saturday afternoon, wheeling a rose gold suitcase and dressed in a long tan coat, no one paid special attention. She looked like she belonged there. Elena was used to moving through places like this. She had the kind of beauty that didn't try too hard: long chestnut hair, smooth skin, understated jewelry. A little mysterious, a little hard to pin down. Her job at a downtown gallery had introduced her to artists, collectors, and patrons with old money and even older secrets. She'd grown comfortable navigating those waters, knowing when to laugh, when to listen, when to disappear. She checked into room 1904 with a brief smile and a soft thank you, declining help with her bags. The reservation had been made a week earlier under her name. A king suite, top floor, skyline view. 2 nights, no special requests, nothing unusual. She took the elevator up alone. By 12 p.m., she had entered her room and closed the door behind her. From the outside, nothing looked suspicious. No one came or went. No shouting, no signs of distress. That evening, her social media showed a carefully cropped photo of a chilled bottle of champagne on the room's marble table, the city lights twinkling in the background. The caption read, "Much needed peace. Fun staycation for cityscape." Her phone activity ended shortly after that. By 11 a.m. the next day, housekeeping knocked and received no answer. They waited, knocked again, nothing. When they finally unlocked the door and stepped inside, they found Elena's body sprawled awkwardly on the plush carpet just beside the bed. She was barefoot, still in the hotel's white robe, one hand stretched toward her phone on the floor. The room was undisturbed, no sign of a struggle, no blood, no broken glass, nothing out of place, except for her. Security was alerted immediately. Hotel staff kept the floor quiet, ushered guests away, and avoided questions. The police arrived quickly, but even they seemed unsure at first. The scene didn't scream foul play. If anything, it looked like she had collapsed on her own. A seizure, maybe. A heart attack. But Elena was young, healthy, no history of serious illness. Something about it didn't feel right. Detectives combed through the room. Her suitcase was still zipped, her clothes neatly folded inside. Makeup arranged on the bathroom counter. A single glass of champagne, half drunk, rested on the table. No pills, no alcohol bottles besides the one from room service. No note, no open windows. The door had been locked from the inside. Security footage added to the puzzle. Elena had been alone when she arrived. No one was seen entering or exiting her room. And yet she had died sometime that night, alone under circumstances that made no immediate sense. The medical examiner couldn't determine the cause of death on the spot. The body was taken away quietly, covered in a black sheet, while curious guests looked on from their doors. Rumors began almost instantly. Some whispered overdose. Others thought suicide. But Elena's family insisted none of that fit. She wasn't depressed. She had plans. She had been excited about something she hadn't told anyone. Behind the scenes, investigators began to look closer. They weren't sure what had happened yet, but they were starting to believe that someone had been with Elena that night, someone who didn't want to be seen. And as the hours ticked by, one question echoed louder than the rest. If no one had entered that room, how did Elena Royce end up dead inside it? The hotel's walls held their silence, but not for long. In the days following Elena Royce's death, her name began to circulate beyond the local headlines. News outlets described her as a rising figure in the art world, a beloved daughter and friend. And, increasingly, The woman found dead in a locked luxury hotel room under mysterious circumstances. But to those who knew her well, or thought they did, those words didn't scratch the surface. There was another side to Elena's story, one that even her closest friends were only beginning to piece together. At first, investigators found little to go on. Her phone had been locked with Face ID, but her laptop, retrieved from her apartment days later, contained encrypted files and folders labeled only with single letters or dates. Inside one of these folders were screenshots of texts, voice memos, and dozens of hidden photos, none of them posted publicly, none familiar to her friends or family. A picture began to emerge of a double life, one that had been carefully constructed, methodically hidden, and ultimately, dangerously close to unraveling. The name that came up again and again in those messages was Marcus. No last name. Just Marcus. At first, detectives assumed he was a friend. But the messages quickly revealed otherwise. They were intimate, emotional, sometimes volatile. Elena and Marcus had been involved for nearly 4 years. Their relationship had started in secret, and stayed that way. He was older, wealthier, and very much married. Marcus Bellamy was a name the public knew well in Chicago's upper circles. Real estate developer. Philanthropist. Smiling husband and father of 2. His photo had appeared in business magazines, society pages, and charity event recaps. But behind the public image was a man with a reputation for being controlling, even ruthless, especially when threatened. Elena's involvement with him had been more than just romantic. She'd helped host events at his properties, advised on art acquisitions for his office spaces, and attended business dinners. Always quietly, always on the sidelines. She had grown used to being invisible. But something had changed in the last few months of her life. In her private journal, tucked between business receipts and a worn passport, she had scribbled a list of statements. None of them complete, none of them dated. Just phrases. Tired of being hidden. He promised he'd leave her. He said, if I talk, I'll regret it. Watching me? Need to record everything. To those reading it, the implications were chilling. Further investigation revealed that Marcus had begun pulling away from Elena recently. Their calls had dropped off. She had sent long messages late at night that went unanswered. One in particular, dated 2 weeks before her death, read simply, "You're not going to erase me. Not this time." Attached to it was a photo of the two of them at a private lake house, arms around each other. That photo had never appeared anywhere else. The metadata placed it at a property Marcus owned under a shell company. Detectives dug deeper. They discovered that Marcus's wife had recently hired a divorce attorney, likely aware of his infidelity, though she had never gone public. Financial records revealed quiet asset transfers, closed accounts, and evidence Marcus had been consolidating funds. And then there were the messages Elena had saved but never sent. Drafts of emails addressed to news outlets, a statement prepared for a lawyer, screenshots of suspicious charges on her credit card. All signs she had been preparing for something, perhaps a confrontation, perhaps a reveal. Whatever it was, she never got the chance to follow through. When police reached out to Marcus for questioning, he was calm. Cooperative even. He admitted to knowing Elena, claimed she had helped with interior art selections, downplayed their connection. He said he hadn't spoken to her in months. He appeared confident, even sympathetic. But investigators noticed how carefully he avoided discussing anything beyond business. And while Marcus insisted he hadn't seen Elena in weeks, there were traces of him all around her final days, too faint to prove, too persistent to ignore. A ride, shared trip canceled at the last minute. A phone number appearing once in her call history and then disappearing. A piece of surveillance footage from her street showing a dark car idling across from her building the night before she checked into the hotel. The pieces weren't fitting perfectly, but they were aligning, slowly, uneasily. Who exactly was Marcus Bellamy to Elena Royce? A former lover? A dangerous obsession? Or something else entirely? The deeper investigators looked, the more they suspected that Elena hadn't just kept a secret. She had uncovered one. And that secret might have been the reason she was dead. The key to unraveling the mystery of Elena Royce's death lay in the shadows. Not in what was seen, but in what was missing. At first glance, the Diamond Heights Hotel seemed like a fortress of security. Dozens of high-resolution cameras lined every hallway, lobby, and exit. Guest keycards tracked every movement in and out of rooms. Staff were trained to notice the smallest irregularity. And yet, somehow someone had managed to enter Elena's room, spend an unknown amount of time there, and leave without being caught on any official recording. The question haunted detectives: how did they do it? Determined to find the answer, the investigation turned to raw surveillance footage. Hours of silent, grainy video from multiple angles were combed through frame by frame. Nothing appeared out of the ordinary at first. Elena entered the hotel at 20:56 p.m. on Saturday. She took the main elevator alone, went straight to her room, and was never seen again. The hallway outside room 1904 remained still and empty for nearly 12 hours. But as investigators reviewed footage from other parts of the building, a single anomaly stood out. At 9:17 p.m., a man in dark clothing entered the hotel through a side entrance used mostly by staff and maintenance crews. He wore a baseball cap pulled low, a surgical mask over his face, and gloves. He moved with familiarity, as though he knew exactly where he was going. Instead of heading to the main elevators, he slipped into a stairwell reserved for hotel personnel, one that connected directly to the upper guest floors without requiring a keycard for access. That camera feed cut off shortly after he entered the stairwell, an apparent glitch, or perhaps something more deliberate. But 4 hours later, just after 100 m, the same man reappeared in another camera's view, this time in a different outfit. He was now wearing gray sweatpants and a zip-up hoodie, his hat gone, the mask replaced with a scarf loosely wrapped around his neck. He carried a black duffel bag. His pace was quicker, more hurried. He exited through the same staff door he had used to come in and disappeared into the night. The footage was time-stamped, and detectives quickly noted the significance. That exit came just 30 minutes after Elena's phone had stopped sending any signals. No calls, no texts, no activity. Whatever had happened in room 1904, it had occurred between 9:30 p.m. and 12:45 a.m. And the man in the stairwell had been inside the building that entire time. Still, he hadn't been seen on the 19th floor. The hallway camera outside Elena's door captured nothing. But that detail, once troubling, suddenly made sense. Behind the scenes, a hotel employee stepped forward anonymously, sharing that the hallway cameras on certain upper floors were scheduled for maintenance that weekend. A handful had been glitching for months. It wasn't unusual for the feed to drop, and management had delayed the repairs. Room 1904 sat in a blind spot. Someone with inside knowledge, or close connections, would have known that. Detectives traced the route the masked man had taken and reviewed footage from surrounding areas. They discovered he had parked blocks away from the hotel, on a quiet side street with no meters or security cameras. The car was a silver Toyota Camry, registered to a rental agency. The name on the contract was fake, but the credit card used to pay matched an account tied to a shell company, one that investigators had already linked to Marcus Bellamy. At this point, the coincidences were stacking too high to ignore. Marcus had denied being anywhere near the hotel that weekend. He had insisted that he hadn't seen or spoken to Elena in months. But the evidence said otherwise. The shell company, the time of death, the hidden security gaps. It was as if someone had planned it all down to the last detail. And yet, there was no physical proof he had been inside the room. No fingerprints. No traceable DNA. No eyewitnesses. Just shadows, surveillance glitches, and a man in a mask who knew how to vanish. But detectives weren't giving up, because even shadows can leave a trail, if you know where to look. The answers the investigators needed came not from the hotel, not from footage or witness statements, but from the quiet, clinical silence of the autopsy room. Elena Royce's body held secrets, and the medical examiner was the first to hear them. At first glance, nothing stood out. No bruises, no lacerations, no visible trauma. Her heart had stopped, that much was clear, but the why remained elusive. Toxicology became the next step, a routine process that, this time, would prove anything but ordinary. Days later, the toxicology report arrived, and it changed everything. In Elena's bloodstream was a rare compound, cyclobenzaprine, a prescription muscle relaxant, typically used in small doses to treat spasms or chronic pain. But the levels in her system were dangerously high, well beyond any therapeutic range. In fact, the dosage was enough to induce extreme drowsiness, respiratory depression, and ultimately cardiac arrest. The drug was odorless, tasteless, and when crushed and dissolved, virtually undetectable in a drink. In the right hands, it was an easy way to mimic a natural death, and in the wrong hands, it was a silent killer. But Elena had no prescription history for the drug, no pill bottles in her apartment, no trace of it in her medical records. Someone had introduced it into her system that night, and had done so with careful precision. Investigators returned to the hotel room, this time with a fresh lens. The champagne glass Elena had been drinking from was sent to a specialized forensic lab. The results confirmed it trace amounts of the same muscle relaxant were found in the residue at the bottom of the glass. She had been drugged. This was no accident, no overdose, no miscalculation. It was a deliberate act, planned, executed, and almost perfectly concealed. Detectives revisited Marcus Bellamy's history with renewed urgency. He had money, he had access, and he had motive. The deeper they dug, the darker his world became. Marcus's financial records were a minefield of hidden transactions and offshore accounts. Over the previous 6 months, he had made large, untraceable wire transfers to obscure vendors and cryptocurrency wallets. One transfer, flagged by a compliance officer at a small European bank, led to a company that operated on the dark web, selling everything from surveillance devices to restricted pharmaceuticals. Among the listed products, cyclobenzaprine in powder form. The transaction had occurred 3 weeks before Elena's death. Investigators traced the delivery to a vacant condo in Marcus's real estate portfolio. Surveillance footage from the building showed a man matching his build entering the unit and leaving with a padded envelope shortly after the shipment was dropped off. He wore a mask and hat, but his walk, his phone activity near the unit, and his key fob usage sealed the connection. And then came the phone data. Marcus's phone had been wiped clean, but a backup retrieved from the cloud revealed several deleted messages between him and an unregistered number. Phrases like, "No risk," right? And "she's becoming a problem," sent chills through the investigation team. Though he never mentioned Elena by name, the timeline matched perfectly with the unraveling of their relationship and her growing unease. Forensic analysts also recovered fragments of a deleted voice memo Elena had recorded on her phone. The quality was poor, her voice quiet and strained. But one line stood out. "If anything happens to me, don't believe it was natural. He said he'd make it look like I just went to sleep." That memo had been deleted the night she died. It was all circumstantial, yet disturbingly precise. Piece by piece, a narrative emerged. Marcus, desperate to keep his secrets buried, had lured Elena to the hotel under the pretense of reconciliation. He had come prepared, with poison, with knowledge of camera blind spots, and with the arrogance of someone who believed he could outsmart everyone. He almost had. But poison has a way of whispering back, and the truth, however buried, had begun to rise. The walls began closing in around Marcus Bellamy faster than he could maneuver. With the toxicology report confirmed, the digital forensics recovered, and the dark web purchase traced to his real estate holdings, the picture of Elena Royce's final hours was no longer blurry. It was chillingly clear. But law enforcement knew a circumstantial case alone would not be enough. They needed something irrefutable. Something he couldn't talk his way out of. They turned their attention to the duffel bag the masked man was seen carrying in and out of the Diamond Heights Hotel. That detail had seemed insignificant at first. A gym bag, maybe. But the theory had changed. Marcus hadn't just brought the drug with him that night. He had brought something else. Something he didn't want to leave behind. It was a forensic specialist who made the breakthrough. On the zipper of Elena's suitcase was a single partial print. It hadn't matched anyone in hotel staff records, nor Elena herself. When tested against Marcus's fingerprint from an unrelated real estate filing, it was a match. That one print, likely left when Marcus staged the scene to make it look untouched, had clung to the soft rubber of the zipper pull, overlooked by everyone until then. It was small, incomplete, but admissible. And more importantly, it placed him in the room. But it wasn't the only mistake he had made. The hotel's Wi-Fi logs revealed a device had connected briefly to the network using a spoofed MAC address just after midnight, the time when Marcus was presumed to be in Elena's suit. The spoofed address was traced to a burner phone purchased with cash a week earlier, but triangulation data placed that same device near Marcus's main residence on multiple occasions. Despite efforts to remain hidden, the technology betrayed him. Still, when confronted with mounting evidence, Marcus remained stone-faced. His legal team claimed the fingerprint could have been transferred unintentionally, that he had met Elena once in passing at a gallery. They questioned the credibility of the Wi-Fi evidence, suggested the voice memo was fabricated, and dismissed the dark web transactions as unverified. But behind the scenes, the pressure was mounting. Marcus's wife, already consulting with divorce attorneys, quietly reached out to law enforcement. She turned over a home security recording, one she had not watched until recently, that showed Marcus returning home in the early hours of the morning on the day Elena was found dead. He entered through the garage, changed his clothes in the laundry room, and dropped something into a trash bin. It was a small, black duffel bag. By the time investigators retrieved the contents from a landfill, it was weather damaged and dirty, but inside they found a champagne cork, a latex glove, and a disposable dropper bottle. All bore trace elements of the same compound found in Elena's system. The cork, when tested, matched the unique threading of the bottle found in her room. The glove had his DNA on the interior. The dropper bottle, though degraded, still contained residue consistent with a dissolved muscle relaxant. That was the moment everything shifted. Marcus Bellamy was arrested at his office 3 weeks after Elena's funeral. No warning, no press. Just a quiet entrance by detectives, handcuffs slipped on without resistance. He said nothing. The trial was the spectacle everyone expected, a powerful man brought down by his secrets, exposed by the woman he tried to erase. Prosecutors presented their case with precision. The defense, despite its resources, couldn't explain away the digital trail, the fingerprint, or the damning evidence retrieved from the trash. But the most powerful moment came from Elena herself, her own words, in that fragile, half-erased recording. "If anything happens to me, don't believe it was natural." In the end, the jury didn't. Marcus Bellamy was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without parole. Elena Royce, silenced in life, had become the voice that brought the truth to light. Her death was no longer a mystery, no longer a headline. It was a reckoning. And for the man who believed he could walk through shadows unseen, the light had finally caught up with him.